Hello, everyone in the panel. We have 14 participants now. Welcome to our full paper session of Nurturing Responsibilities in Sustainability, where we have 3 papers that are going to be presented today. So towards responsible PD, putting feminist new materialisms to work in the practices of participatory design by Suvi, Pihkala, and Helena Karasti. Off-the-shelf digital tools as a resource to nurture the commons by Mela, Raul, Nicolai, and Maurizio. Infrastructuring ecological sustainability through multi-scalar speculations by Simran Chopra and colleagues. If we can please, Paulina, move to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So before we start our presentations, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waters from where I'm speaking to you today and where I live. That's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. Indigenous Australians have their own calendars of 6 to 7 seasons, and these help me situate, or I guess tune into the feeling, thinking of country. August is known as the wombat and pre-spring season. Also when the lyrebirds are in courtship action and when the hearts of the fern trees are available fruits. So besides learning about these things online, I've been lucky to meet with these creatures at the Dandenong Mountains, which is a place that it's close to where I live and that I visit often because it allows me to reconnect with an internal sense of home that I continually nurture to maintain my own well-being as a long-term foreigner and migrating person in these lands, to whom I'm very grateful for being so welcoming. And I want to extend this acknowledgement to the countries and indigenous nations where everyone in the panel and audience is connecting from, including the custodians of the Andes mountains and waters and lands of South America, where I am from, and pay my deepest respects to the elders past, present, and emerging worldwide. And I invite participants to acknowledge the traditional custodians from where you are attending in the Zoom chat box if you want. So to the guidelines of being together that I'm sure you've heard and listened in other sessions that you might have been, I just go through them and you can see them in the screen. Just a reminder to be kind and mindful with the differences or maybe technical difficulties we might have, to invite you just to listen deeply and participate with respect, to mute your microphones during the sessions, to be careful with your words as we engage in conversations in chat or in the moments of questions, to be constructive and with your critical or compliments. Yes, so I guess we can move to the next slide. Thank you, Paulina. So welcome, Suvi, and that's your time. Thank you.
I think you got the wrong video. It's mine.
while we are sorting the video, an invitation is that when I was reading the papers and watching the videos, there were some keywords or personal reflections or memories that came to mind of ways in which I can engage with the author's work in the future, or memories that they brought me. And I was just taking notes on the side of words. They didn't need to be very complicated, long thoughts. So you can pose questions in the Q&A, but also if you want to put random words that come up to you when you're listening the conversation in the presentations, you can put them as a text on the side of the chat, and maybe by the end of the session we're going to have lots of words that were in a way invited by this, and you might see that making sense in all of the presentations later, because they all talk about different ways of phases of the design. So if we see this session as the phase of sharing and dissemination and engaging with the audience and see how the audience speak back, that might be another way of continuing the design. So you are all welcome. And Suvi.
Thank you for attending our presentation on feminist new materialisms and what they might offer for the practices of participatory design. Before starting, I want to shortly position myself. So I'm presenting our paper from Oulu, which is in the northern part of Finland. And being here, I'm reminded by the Sami people living in the Arctic region, and also of the silence that still remains around their history and presence here. So I wish to acknowledge the Sami people and extend that acknowledgement to all First Nations members and to the diverse knowledges Indigenous people and communities hold, also in relation to the ontological thinking we address here in this paper. The paper I'm presenting stems from our contemplations with Helena Karasti from over the past years. The starting point could be captured as a sense of bewilderment and generative trouble we've encountered. So about 10 years ago, we were doing a participatory design project with professionals working around workplace harassment interventions. I came to this project with this kind of vision that certainly a phenomenon like harassment and intervening in it is a shared matter of concern, and it would be relatively easy to get people together to learn from each other around it. And in a way it was. But when doing the designing and engaging with some of these professionals, I also noticed the complexity of the issue and the diverse experiences that seemed to swarm the spaces of our encounters when we met. So there was this sense that there is more going on than what we expected and anticipated. And then later, I got to become involved in creative research activism to explore gender and sexual harassment in pre-teen peer cultures. This research was based on the understanding that with phenomena this sensitive, silenced and normalized as harassment in children's lives is, the methods we are used to use may fail to enable space for those layers of experience that are difficult to articulate. So this project was about experimenting with new creative ways of engaging children in exploring what matters to them and what they would like to see change. For me, both these examples are about working with or engaging with complexity and sensitivity. And they both have informed my and our quest to articulate what does it mean to engage responsibly and accountably with this complexity and sensitivity, and what does it mean to create space for things to matter. These contemplations are something we see being increasingly explored and brought forward also in participatory design. So there is this effort to generate alternative, more expansive and welcoming, and centrally more responsible and accountable ways of both understanding the world and doing participatory design as part of it. And informing and inspiring this work is a shift to emphasize relationality and interdependency, processuality and becoming, as well as non-human and the more than human. And these are the discussions we want to join. So what we want to do is to give a glimpse into our work where attention to relationality and becoming, in our case inspired particularly by feminist new materialisms, has helped us find ways to grapple with the unanticipated, unexpected, and the as yet articulated, so that we could make meaningful impact. These things we are discussing have multiple touch points with PD, because the question of socio-material relationality, non-human, and becoming are not new. The idea of complex socio-technical and socio-material systems has been an important part of how PD processes and practices and the objects of design have been understood. Since the mid-90s, more specific articulations have emerged. The notion of infrastructuring has drawn attention to multi-temporality and processual dimensions in PD, and design things has looked at socio-material assemblies and the role non-human actors play in co-constituting things and issues. And now, just in the span of a few years, notions such as becoming with, responsibility, entanglement, effect, more than human have come about, and these are drawing explicitly, for example, from post-humanist and new materialist philosophies, feminist technosciences, and indigenous cosmologies. So there is definitely a growing momentum around these issues, even though it has remained thus far of interest to only a rather small group of scholars in BD. Our entry point to adding to these discussions is informed by our backgrounds in participatory design, science and technology studies, but also educational research and feminist and gender studies. Particularly, we are drawing inspiration from developments in the field of feminist, post-human, and new materialist educational research. So with feminist new materialisms, we refer to a transdisciplinary body of work rooted in feminist post-structural, post-colonial, and intersectional and queer theories, and employing materialist and relational ontologies of becoming to disrupt dominant humanist and anthropocentric modes of knowledge-making. So this work is influenced by a range of thinkings and thinkers, of which we have highlighted here those who have influenced our thinking the most. And what these thinkings have taught us is, for one, that the central referent to reality are interactive entanglements of human and non-human bodies, discourses, and materiality. So this is about the mutual co-constitution of never separate entities and about the inventive capacity in this interactive dynamism. So that there is a possibility for what else and not yet and more than embedded in these entanglements. Another thing these thinkings remind us is that it's an ethical matter to be part of those interactions. And this is what Barad and Haraway capture with the notion of responsibility. So as researchers, through our choices of methods, interests, concepts, histories, and many other things, we partake in some things coming to matter more than others. And that makes us responsible and accountable in very specific, situated, and material ways. In the field of educational feminist new materialist research, this thinking has given rise to responsible research and praxis, which strives to put this idea of post-human ethics to work by continuously unpicking what is our ability to respond and how to use that to enable the response of the other. So we want to slow down with these two ideas of engaging with the potentiality towards what else and not yet, and the challenge to unpick our ability to respond, to make our practices matter. And we want to bring them into dialogue with participatory design. To do so, we draw insights from the two participatory design and research engagements that we started with. Our work revolving workplace harassment interventions was part of a wider research project on the uses of social media in professional communities from early 2010s. The Creative Research Activism with Children in Turn is an ongoing project and work of a FIRE research collective, which is focused on exploring and addressing harassment in pre-teen peer relations using feminist new materialist-inspired arts-based approaches. So drawing insights from these two examples, we built 3 propositions of how feminist new materialist praxis could be put to work in the practices of participatory design, in how we set up our encounters, respond during our engagements, and how we understand our responsibilities and accountabilities as designers and researchers. I will open up a bit what we mean by these 3 propositions with some examples from mainly the creative research activism with children. So our first proposition is setting up for inventiveness. This is about intentionally designing and devising for the unarticulated and the unanticipated. As said, our work has brought us to engage with phenomena that are sensitive, little addressed, and often normalized and silenced, such as gender and sexual harassment in children's everyday lives. So to address it has required approaches that go beyond that which is already known and easily articulated. So in the example from work with children, feminist new materialist praxis has meant that in the setup of the workshops, in addition to engaging with the children, we engage with more than human relationality, with the inventive capacity of these interactive entanglements. And this is visible in the careful and purposeful design of the space and its materiality, iterations of activities, rhythm of making an effective atmosphere captured in some of the pictures from the workshops here. The aim has been not to find out things based on preconceived ideas, but about intentionally setting up for inventiveness so that we enable exploration of the not yet and what else there may be, with the motivation of imagining alternative, affirmative ways of knowing and being. This setting up for inventiveness then leads to the second proposition of how feminist new materialisms might inform our practices. And this is about responsiveness with that which emerges. Every time we invite participants along, whether professionals wanting to better their practices of intervention or children exploring what feels good or hurtful in their relationships, experiences, thoughts, hopes and concerns emerge that in a way overspill the aims of our projects. And as said, we even intentionally set up for the emergent in ways that enables the unexpected and the unanticipated so that we could be open to more expansive ways of thinking and knowing. What feminist new materialist praxis and the idea of responsibility reminds us here is the importance of paying attention to and noticing this emergent nature of our encounters. It also reminds us of the need to be responsive with it, or what we might talk of as moving with it, so moving with entirely new matters of concern that emerge during the processes. And this requires that we think beyond our projects and preset aims. For example, our work with professionals working around harassment interventions ended up involving only part of those who were initially imagined as participants, because something we hadn't expected had come up, and it was allowed to reframe the process. In our paper, we also share examples from the creative research activism with children on how even individual encounters during workshops can be tapped into and moved with, and how doing so can help make the experiences children share matter, in the form of, for example, pedagogical practices for teachers or activism to evoke response from the wider public. The underpinning idea here is that because we can't know beforehand what matters, we need to be responsive with that which emerges. And finally, the third proposition we make is that feminist new materialisms can enrich the ways we understand researcher-designers' responsibilities and accountabilities. Normative ethics and responsibility as a matter of equality and democratization of design are already deep-seated in PD, and they are significant. Feminist new materialisms prompt us to think what all or what else we are entangled with through our practices and how. This is a speculative praxis of mapping our multi-scalar and material entanglements, for example with the phenomena we study. In our case, with the seriousness of harassment, the sensitivity and vulnerability in sharing experiences, and the significance of bringing about change in abusive practices. It might also help us notice seemingly mundane parts of our practices, such as post-it notes or craft materials and glitter that tie us to waste and consumption, and also how when writing and citing, we are always inevitably entangled in particular epistemic inclusions and exclusions. So to think with Barad and Haraway, our responsibilities and accountabilities are not bound to doing the right thing, and they are not once and for all, but rather require that we continuously unpick and unpack how we could use our ability to respond to enable the response of the other. To draw this into conclusion, the generative trouble of our experiences and the company of feminist new materialist theories and thinkings has brought us to the three propositions, a form of responsible PD, if you will, which, in addition to engaging with user participants and employing tools and techniques to forge what they know, engages with the more than human relationality to enable the not yet and what else to emerge. In addition to working with our design agenda, it notices and pays attention to and becomes responsive beyond preset expectations, roles and intentions, because that what else we then give space to might be vital for making our practices and processes really matter. And in addition to ticking the boxes of normative ethics, treading carefully and committing to democratic visions, it also acknowledges that our responsibilities and accountabilities extend across contexts and times, and committedly asks what else, what next, so that it could be more than. As a final note, as we mentioned already earlier, what we propose has multiple touch points with what BD is. So our starting point for writing our paper and what we want to close with is the promise of and, which is not about us sharing our account to make claims or replacing something that is already there, but about joining and expanding and participating in creating a space where also we and our thinking can be enriched and enabled to become otherwise. So with that, we want to thank you for your attention and really look forward to questions, comments and discussions.
Thank you so much. That was great, and I encourage everyone to read the paper to find a bit more details of each of the 2 cases that are presented in the article to illustrate these PD propositions. Does anyone have any questions? I can see claps, which I echo the claps. And if we don't have any burning questions, maybe we move to the next one and then we accumulate the sessions for a conversation at the end. Thank you, Paulina.
Hi everyone. I am Mela and I am presenting off-the-shelf digital tools as a resource to nurture the commons, a paper that I co-authored with Raul Masu, Nicolai Hansen and Maurizio Teli. The content of this paper is based on the reflective account that accompanied a participatory design project that I carried on in collaboration with a group of artists activists in a small Portuguese island. The paper proposes that off-the-shelf digital commons can be used in the context of participatory design to support commoning practices. In our experience, focusing on tools that are already available allows directing resources on participation rather than software development. This possibility is particularly valuable in context with limited resources like the one where I was operating in. Additionally, relying on already existing tools potentially fosters the sustainability of results when researchers leave the field and contribute to spreading the knowledge that digital commons are a valuable alternative to market-based options. To practically implement a participatory design project relying on the use of already existing digital commons, finding and then selecting the tools is a crucial step. Throughout the research process, we had to face an array of questions. The most complex one has been how do we understand whether an off-the-shelf tool can be considered a commons or not? However, finding a sort of answer to this question was not resolutive, as there were plenty of more mundane issues to solve. For example, where do we find digital commons? How do we select them? Or should we present multiple alternatives to people, for example? In this paper, we try to tackle these questions by proposing both theoretical consideration and practical criteria. Before introducing the core contribution of the paper, we would like to briefly introduce the overall participatory design process. Our research was held in Madeira, a 250,000 inhabitants European island, which is considered an outermost region. We collaborated with Equilibrio, an informal group born in 2019 to connect people interested in developing artistic projects with ecological and social goals. We chose this group because of his tendency to organize horizontally rather than following hierarchical structures. We presented ourselves as researchers and activists that investigate processes to spread digital commoning. Our project aimed to support participants in adopting digital tools that are better connected to their interests and values. We articulated this aim in a three-phase project that has been extensively described in a paper presented at the DAS in 2021. And this image here graphically represents the project. We highlight the three-phase in blue, while in orange you can observe the time dedicated to understanding, finding, and selecting digital commons. In the first phase, we organized face-to-face activities as well as online activities to collect information on the digital and non-digital artifacts currently in use by participants. Moreover, we asked them to connect these artifacts to their interests and values. In phase 2, we analyzed the information gathered during the first phase to select off-the-shelf digital commons that could support participant interests while adhering to their overall values. In phase 3, we organized a face-to-face workshop to propose the adoption of digital commons that we had selected. Each one has been presented highlighting the reason that led us to pick it in relation to specific interests and values of the group. After discussing the tools with the participants, we invited them to download and install the digital commons. The discussion and technical support on digital commons continued in a dedicated Telegram chat. And moreover, we supported the group in finding technical solutions to organize their artistic project. From this image, it is immediately visible that interrogating over off-the-shelf digital commons, looking for them, and finally selecting the ones to present to participants has been a central activity which accompanied the whole process. In the empirical part of our research, we repeatedly faces the question, can we consider these artifacts a common or not? We discovered that the answer is oftentimes not a neat yes or no. The answer is usually, it depends, as many digital artifacts support commoning from different perspectives and with different intensity. In the attempt to unpack how digital tools embed the commoning practice, we created the commons gradient. The commons gradient here allowed to graphically summarize the reflection on one specific digital tool by positioning it on 4 continuums: commons in and through design, environmental sustainability, and anti-monopolism. The most important component is the commoning in and through design continuum. This distinction aims at considering at the same time two general tendencies in the discourse on digital commons. Commoning in design refers to those tools that are created and managed as common, such as free, libre, and open source software. So this side of the chart mirrors the reflection on flaws and wikis proposed by Benkler. Commoning through design refers to those situations where digital tools are used to support commoning practices, such as in the case, for example, of a supply-led carpooling platform. This side of the chart reflects more the commoning practice discourse developed by Bollier. A specific tool can entail both commoning in and through design, or just one of them. For example, LibreOffice is an example of floss and user commons in design, but its use does not necessarily imply further commoning practice. As a matter of fact, a LibreOffice spreadsheet could be used to organize data to support alt-right movements or to organize other kind of not that nice stuff. On the opposite side, supply-led carpooling platforms like BlaBlaCar is specifically designed to support commoning practice among its users, but it's a for-profit company that does not share its code. We also identified two additional issues that are part of the overall discourse on digital commons: contrasting monopolies and supporting environmental sustainability. We introduced anti-monopolism because the domain of few monopolistic actors over the digital space is in direct contrast to the ideals of commoning. Considering that platforms have a natural tendency toward monopolization, we support that the simple act of shifting toward less established alternative is a small anti-monopolistic choice per se, as it supports the existence of a plurality of players. Taking this perspective to the very extreme, choosing Yahoo instead of Gmail would be a small step in the right direction, because both actors aim at establishing a monopoly. However, Yahoo is not likely to succeed anytime soon. We introduced the environment, as this issue is traditionally important in the debate of commons. Additionally, the environmental impact of digital activities is becoming more and more debated, both in terms of cost and in terms of opportunities. Academic debate on digital commons and floss activism are increasingly engaging with topic and highlighting the potential of digital commons to support environmental sustainability, for example, as a way to prolong hardware life. Reflecting on these issues, we discover that a tool can be a commons from one perspective, but not from the other one. This means that the commons gradient can help to unpack multiple relevant aspects and multiple layers. Additionally, if we are working with people, we always need to consider which tools are already in use. In some cases, even proposing tools that are not perfect commons can contribute to take a step in the right direction. Reflecting on these elements allows locating an off-the-shelf digital tool in the common gradient, unpacking multiple relevant aspects. This is particularly useful if we are engaging with PD practice, which requires a lot of flexibility to meet the participant needs. In this specific context, we support that being a commons is not much of an ontological quality, but it is a relational property depending on the context. For example, if we are working with a group of people relying exclusively on Google services pre-installed on their Android phones, even proposing slightly better tools can constitute a step in the right direction. The commons gradients also allows to visualize in the same diagram different tools, like here you can see, facilitating the comparison. For example, here the chart is populated with different instant messaging apps that we considered in the context of our research. And you can also see that in some cases we didn't have enough information to populate the chart. Populating a chart with multiple tools can be helpful if we need to select one among many tools, and it's particularly useful if the difference among them are subtle, and there are just small differences. As anticipated, dedicated time to understand whether a tool can be considered a commons is necessary. However, it was not the only issues we encountered. In fact, during the project, we faced multiple mundane questions such as where to find off-the-shelf commons, or whether it was a good idea proposing multiple tools that perform the same function to keep the conversation as open as possible. We summarized the main question we encountered in this table here. It's the right direction. In this table, and this table is extensively discussed in the second part of the paper. Some of these questions may appear quite trivial, but in our experience, they were all fundamental to be able to present viable solutions to our participants. Additionally, the paper presents a list of repositories that we found extremely useful to find digital tool to present to participants. The commons gradients, as well as the other reflection proposed in this paper, do not aim to propose a definitive taxonomy on digital commons. Rather, we hope it can serve as a tool to bridge between theoretical models and practical projects. As such, our proposal should be intended as flexible, and we hope it can be adapted to other practical scenarios. For now, it's all. Thank you for your attention, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Mela and team. We don't seem to have questions directed to this latest presentation. At the moment in the chat, we do have one for the presentation one, so maybe we keep them accumulating for the end. And we continue with the third and final from Simran Chopra and colleagues. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Simran Chopra. I'm doing my research at Northumbria University and in the final year of my PhD. I'm an Indian citizen living in the UK, working with deprived, marginalized communities who grow food in urban areas. I acknowledge the immigrants on this land and throughout the world from past and present, including my ancestors, and the labor that they put in to be part of society to create a better world for themselves and for others. I do recognize my privilege as I speak to you in English, a result of colonization, however, using it to voice systemic injustices and oppressions. Thank you for coming to my paper presentation. It is my pleasure to present to you on behalf of myself and my co-authors, who you can see listed on the slide. Our paper is called Infrastructuring Ecological Sustainability Through Multi-Scalar Speculations. This paper responds to the challenges faced by grassroots sustainability communities in addressing ecological issues through local action. We report on a series of speculation-oriented engagement with an urban food-growing community at early stages of an infrastructuring process, as an example of sustainability research within participatory design. In this work, we understand the efforts of our community of food growers as a way of living a more sustainable life by challenging existing ecologically unsustainable lifestyle, habits and habitats within this approach, and manifested through the design of various speculative spaces. We address questions of how to meaningfully support communities in exposing concerns as they envision future ecological sustainability. This research is part of a long-term collaboration involving academic research and a local community interest company based in an economically deprived neighborhood in the UK. Our 4 speculative workshops focus on exploring with the community future socio-technical visions of food growing to shed light on how these are positioned within and unconstrained by local, national, and global socio-political contexts, contributing understandings of relational agency and infrastructuring for sustainable design using multi-scalar perspectives on sustainable practices. Recently, an increasing number of authors have urged the participatory design community to play a more significant role in addressing longitudinal global issues that are plaguing the planet. And as a matter of priority, um, of particular concerns is the need to foster understanding of ecological unsustainability as a consequence of complex social practices entwined within multiple normative structures like local government policies, how these structures disempower citizens by disregarding situated knowledges and place-based interventions, which have very complex histories and fragile ecosystem. So prior work in participatory design, engaging with grassroots communities has focused on co-developing futures or challenging normative one by creating alternatives. However, many of these reported projects tend to portray a fairly unproblematic narrative of success, but the wider participatory design research community is becoming increasingly aware that there are two sides to the participatory design process. The reporting of our successful research stories and often hidden and harder to articulate messy conflictual dimensions unfolding through the process. With the ever so present challenges that ensue, for example, the climate crisis, now more than ever, we must fully engage with these messy side of practices, and we must respond to these challenges and limitations that participatory design faces as it strives to support and sustain socio-political action within these contexts, and to foster more sustainable ecological futures as they are so forcefully shaped by wider landscapes of socio-political change. Um, we report on a community food growing project as an example of sustainability research within participatory design, demonstrating the complexity of such engagements when working through relationships across local and global concerns. We focus on infrastructuring place-based action of the community and connecting these to the broader socio-political and economic landscapes. So our work engages with Klager and Schiller's idea of multi-scalar orientation. Um, and so they say that socio-spatial spheres of practice that are constituted in relationship to each other and within various hierarchies of networks of power, scales are not considered as distinct in their spatial categorization of macro, micro, meso, but they're mutually constituted, relational, and interpreting, spanning global interconnected processes. Therefore, applying a multi-scalar orientation to infrastructuring and design calls for explicitly attempting to surface the different scales enacted in everyday social material practices. Furthermore, to address these multi-scalar concerns, we moved away from the experiment as a site where controlled variables can validate hypotheses but to look at it as an iterative, evolving, ongoing tinkering process. So local food growing is a very well researched site for sustainability action and sits within a nexus between planetary systems, global and local ecologies, and political economies. Therefore, to create an evolving process that would surface such a nexus, we devised a series of experimental workshops where we actively sought to bring to the fore everyday future-oriented practices that connect different socio-political and economic scales linked to potential futures. With our workshops, we aim to open spaces where multi-scalar concerns and practices around food growing and ecological sustainability could be explored and their relationships examined. We contribute a multi-scalar perspective to speculative participatory workshops to connect everyday ecological food practices and imagine futures to socio-political realities across micro, meso, and macro scales. The workshop surfaced how social material complexities shape imaginations for sustainability and relational civic agency for situated change. So we worked with a neighborhood in the northeast of England, which has a multi-ethnic resident population and has a number of active citizen initiatives. But the neighborhood is also facing deprivation due to austerity measures. Engagement with the neighborhood's food growing community began when the director of a local micro business contacted our research team in early 2018. Our exploratory series of 4 participatory workshops were designed to foster relational spaces where everyday ecological, sustainable food practices and their imagined futures could be articulated and connected to the wider structures and landscape of socio-political and economic uncertainties faced by the community in order to build capacity and better navigate such complex contexts by employing a variety of multi-scalar design strategies and tactics to bring to the fore the tensions and conflicts that arise at different intersecting scales. Like micro would be a garden or a neighborhood, a meso would be national policies, macro would be planet. As these everyday activities are related to or connected to these local, national, and global politics, where emergence of responses and concerns are key to each workshop aligning with research, where the interventions were designed and staged to intervene in everyday life as a site for applying situated methods that surface alternative forms of awareness and relational understanding. To this end, we designed each workshop in accordance with the responses and concerns surfaced in the previous one and brought these into dialogue with specific geographical scales. For example, the results from the first workshop, which was about the food growing spaces in the neighborhood, informed the design and delivery of the second workshop, which was about visiting these places on the walk and reimagining the neighborhood. So each workshop was focusing on the food growing community and their practices to deepen multi-scalar exploration rather than extending it beyond the community, revealing the messy underlying values, politics, and attachments deriving ongoing efforts of the local urban food growing community, thus leading to the emergence of multi-scalar themes and concerns, example, power, relations, place expressed by the community, and then folding these insights into each workshop into the next subsequent session. So our findings surface creation of commons through individual sharing and catharsis, situation of tensions and future action within the neighborhood, experiences of disempowerment through scale, problematization of innovation through everyday practices and community values. For consideration of time, I will elaborate on the third one, which is experiences of disempowerment through scale. In the workshops, fictional futures and speculative spaces were shaped by actual political landscapes like Brexit, which was present at the time. This exposed the scale and uncertainty associated with the macro level challenges and with abstract concepts such as sustainability, climate change, and national and global politics. These evoked anxieties in participants who voiced their lack of agency in shaping and navigating events like Brexit and climate change, which would eventually impact the community food growing future at the local neighborhood level. As a result, the participants exchanged their current views and opinions on the matter of these macro level concerns rather than engaging with the possibilities of creating alternate futures. It became difficult for us as researchers to engage in discussions on potential speculative responsive to such significant world-changing or world-shaping events. However, we also came to better appreciate the impact that these have on participants and their sense of making things possible within their reach. So through our case study, we aim to build capacity and resilience by activating different scales to support connections to the bigger picture of a detrimental economic and political system. The aim was to collectively have a better understanding of the implicit relationships and the political structures that underpin food growing efforts, highlighting what was considered both valuable and problematic in current and imagined futures. We discuss our strategies for activating place-based concerns and servicing relational civic agency when developing multi-scalar speculation within participatory design. I will discuss infrastructuring place-based sustainability through multi-scalar experiments. For urban food growing, place-based responses are significant for infrastructuring efforts, since access to and use of specific pieces of land and soil is fundamental to the practice in a way that isn't always relevant in participatory design contexts where infrastructuring and social innovation has previously taken place. At the same time, the ability to grow food in urban areas is also impacted by a range of local and global concerns and influences beyond the control of residents, like policies and access to land, etc. Our intention was to bring into dialogue these different scales and a multi-scalar approach in a more practicable way by moving between very intimate spaces of, say, home gardens to and relating it to planetary care, and situating our workshops within the context of the neighborhood and the community's ongoing efforts in sustainable food growing activities in juxtaposition to these scalar issues helped us focus ideas and speculations around existing infrastructures and achievable place-based change. Through the multi-scalar infrastructuring process, we surface these gritty articulations of the valued and problematic relationship between community members, available resources, and constraining forces. The value of doing so was also found in the workshop's ability to bring to the fore how these issues were perceived differently by different members of the community, sparking debates and emotionally charged contestations, and thus exposing place-based issues that are embodied multi-scalar conflicts like land ownership and conflicts of private public spaces, bringing to fore the tacit taken for granted norms and politics embedded in the mundane community infrastructures and their installed base, raising perhaps more profound questions as to what and who can benefit from community food growing. However, questions like these can lead to diversity of responses, which can be difficult to consolidate in a consensual action for researchers or communities to tackle. Thereby, researchers need to create ways of navigating diversity of ideas and possible sustainable futures at local scale in order to be able to act. We also suggest sustainability and community-based action in participatory design should highlight the importance of scale, not just in terms of focusing on local scale intervention, but also in terms of how future work should connect to larger scale political, social, and economic factors that impact people's ability to create change. Please read our paper for more details. Thank you for attending our presentation. Please feel free to get in touch and ask questions about our work.
Thank you so much, Simra and the team, and all of the three presentations. They were so inspiring in the presentation format as well as in the paper. That another encouragement for people to go and read them. We do have a question in the chat from Andy to Suvi. Have you seen it, Suvi?
Yes, I have. I noticed when you said that there's a question. I went to look at it as well, and I think it's a good question. So thank you. An important question. So is there? Does everyone see? No, only I see. I think I need to read the question, or does Andy want to read it aloud, or?
And Andy's in the webinar, so he can't do that, Suvi.
Oh. Okay, so I'll read.
But everyone should be able to see the Q&A, but I'll post it in the chat.
So it's there as well, but I'll read it anyway. Is there danger of the focus on what else and what next, squeezing out things that already matter before the work starts? Doesn't it sometimes help to focus on something in a convergent way? So that's a good question, and I think something that we've been working on, particularly with this. If you read the paper, you learn more about the creative activism with children, and in that work, particularly, we've been working a lot with this idea of how to compose our workshops and our research encounters and events in a way that enables things, in our case, experiences and knowledges and visions for change related to young people's power relations, gendered and sexual power relations in their peer cultures, to be surfaced and
come to be addressed, and you know, for us to be able to help create more, you know, ethically sustainable, positive peer cultures. And for me, what else and what next doesn't emerge out of this kind of constellation of anything goes. It's about it's always in a way rooted in what already matters. And to give a concrete example of that, you know, our work with children, when we compose our workshops, some of the pictures in the slide there were from our workshops. We bring a lot of research-based knowledge, our understandings of what is happening in young peer cultures into the workshop, into the composition of what we will talk about, how we will introduce the topic. We also bring a lot of artworks from other children, from our previous work with children on similar topics that convey things that matter to children that others have shared. And through these different kinds of you know, discursive elements, like things that people have told and shared, and also in a way affective experiences of, for example, harassment or things that have felt bad, we try to compose the workshops so that, in addition to that children get to approach this topic of abusive power relations in peer cultures without fixing it to, you know, preconceived idea that we as researchers or adults bring to the table. So it's part, those concerns that already are there, that are important policy. We know in educational environments the problems there are with children and young people from the perspective of gender, sexuality, harassment, bullying. So we don't want to take those away, but want to compose workshops and encounters where there's a freedom to explore those from different perspectives, and that is in a way the piece of setting up for inventiveness for those concerns that are important for peer cultures, for example, in this case more widely, to be approached differently, allow space for those different concerns and surprising, unexpected concerns to emerge. And another aspect is that it also allows to not just explore what is, but also what might be, what else children would want to see change, and how those, you know, experiences of hurt and abusive practices, for example, in peer cultures that children share, how we can also kind of move from those experiences to those visions of change that we can then tackle together and activate, for example, in the spheres of school or you know, more wider public. So depending on how you approach that, but I think, you know, trying to enable those what else and what next is not either or question in relation to the things that already matter, but rather kind of balancing on how to make space for alternative ways, alternative concerns to emerge and for them to be addressed. I don't know if I understood, if I responded, hopefully I responded to the question, but I think it's an important one and kind of an ongoing question of what the ways we approach things, what does that enable, what does that disable, and how to balance that, and how to take account and be accountable also in relation to what our practices enable or disable or help come to matter. Indeed, just to follow up, I'm not taking over the entire Q&A session, but indeed, it's about, and kind of in that sense, the setting up for inventiveness and the responsiveness as things emerge and what happens is kind of an ongoing reflection and return and turn kind of thing. So in my mind at least.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat for Mela and for Simran. The one from Mela that was also in the chat and the Q&A from Joanna. Can you see it, Mela? Do you want me to read it? Thanks to all the presenters, great work. My question is to Mela. Were the participants interested in using the tools that score higher as commons? What does it take for commoners to switch to more commons-sensitive digital tools, especially if they have been used to using certain tools for a while?
Okay. First question. It depends. The answer is it depends. First of all, most participants did not knew about the existence of tools that were different from the pre-installed version. I did not work with a group of people that was particularly interested in technology nor particularly tech savvy. So some of them made the immediate assumption that all technology was monopolistic and all technologies was deeply ingrained in the current capitalistic system. So the first thing for them was the surprise to discover that something else was existing and was creating in a completely different situation, in a completely different context. Then in some cases, I would say they opted for the one that scored higher. In other, they prefer to mediate. In particular, this is one case I don't think I discuss it in the paper, but when it came to the artistic project that I supported by proposing a set of possible digital commons, they chose one that was less extreme, that was less commonly, because that would have made them completely independent from me and from Raul, the second author, because it was easier to use and easier to set up. So I would say that the issue of usability that I talk about in the paper, and that was also spoken about by Sara Heitlinger. I'm sorry, I butchered her surname, in a paper that was presented yesterday, that was talking about the issue about digital commons with the usability. She was taking, of course, another perspective, but I agree with her. This is an issue, in particular for less tech savvy and less expert motivated people. When does it take for a commoner to switch to more common sensitive digital tools? This is a really complex question, and I really don't have a definitive answer. In my experience, I saw that having someone, in this case me, that takes the burden of understanding people, artifact ecologists, so understanding what people are currently using and what are their interests, and proposing small adjusting, small interventions, and giving to people the possibility to decide to either go full commons and took a lot of effort to adapt, or just made a small change. I think that these make a difference, in particular working with groups of people where some people may have more time and effort to dedicate, while some people maybe not so much. So this flexibility toward people, and a strong attention toward their interests and toward the artifacts ecologies that are already in use. I would say this is fundamental. Then we had a really nice workshop on relational commons a few days ago, and I started thinking about the difficulties of creating an emotional connection with what I call commons in design. There is commoning in the creation of these tools, but when we use them, we don't have the means to perceive it the way we perceive this emotional connection when we work, for example, in a local project. I think this feeling of warmth is fundamental to get engaged for many people, and this is very difficult to convey. That's my answer.
Thank you, Mela. And we have two questions for Simran, one in the chat and one in the Q&A. The one in the chat was post second that it's a bit more conceptual by Laura, and the one in the Q&A, it's about the barriers that you might have found. If you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so I'll take the one by Anne first. So she's saying, how engaged were people with the idea of sustainable food in your research? And did you find the factors like time, poor knowledge were barriers in engaging with these ideas? So I guess my community that I was engaging with, they were already quite geared up to actually look at how they can grow food within their limited resources, limited spaces, like in containers and things. And they were very attuned to sustainable food growing within their limited resources, like recycling containers, recycling soil, sharing resources. So they weren't the kind of people who were had poor knowledge, so they were quite knowledgeable in these practices already. But obviously when I as researcher went on field and were asking for them to give me time for their workshops, obviously time becomes a barrier for engagement within these ideas. So it wasn't and also the project was geared or channeled to be part of their already existing practices. So I wasn't going in with the idea of sustainability. I was looking for them to tell me what they thought was sustainability to them. So they were so it was within this kind of developing iterative workshop series. It was to build on their expertise and take their values and concerns within the process and weave it into the design of the workshops as well. So I guess I think I've answered the question. Taking on to the second one by Laura, does the multi-scalar approach also map to multi-level perspectives from transition design? And if that was somehow part of the conceptualization, this is the first part of the question. So I don't. So when we were trying to conceptualize the series, we actually did look at transition design, but it wasn't a part of the conceptualization. I think the conceptualization process was very free flowing because we were also trying to understand how we can use speculation with a community group and understand what their concerns were with the future. And the multi-scalar approach came into being with these engagements. It wasn't that we went into the field thinking that we'll do a multi-scalar approach in understanding what the future is about. And the second part of the question is, I wonder if there are conceptual differences or similarities in connecting different social material fields, scales, levels in your opinion. So I guess what we're also saying in our paper that these scales aren't separated, they're co-constituted, and it's to understand how these similarities and differences kind of affect each other within the process. And it's to also understand how these different social materials, fields, scales, or people's understandings of these social material scales are then kind of woven into what they think about the future, about what does it mean for say your front yard food growing, to the policies that are developed, or the kind of money that is available for the council to just clean your street. So it's how do these things are how are these things interrelated within each other. Yeah, I guess that's how I would like to answer the question.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes, which is, we are only just getting started, and because I have the mic, I'm just gonna be so selfish and ask one question myself. For all of the presenters, maybe as an opportunity to say to quote Suvi and Karasti, the what else and more than and not yet that you didn't have space or time to include in your papers, and because it's been months after you wrote it and things have moved, I imagine, in the projects and participants and in your thinking. Is there something that you want to share of where you're thinking and the projects are? You are muted.
Yes, I'll take that. So I had another engagement with the same neighborhood, and I think it's very much aligned to Suvi's work as well, of responsibility and how you contextualize yourself and going beyond the engagement. So and also it's part of Mela's work of using technology to then look at long-term engagement and creating commons within the process. So I was using WhatsApp for these kind of longer conversations for my community to then think about the future and then take it up on their own and make it part of their own practices to then communicate with each other and think about it. So I guess it was also to kind of look at how the community takes on the initiatives themselves and carry it through, much more in line with Suvi's responsibility of how do you make it take it forward, I guess.
For me, also, I think that's every project that I've been involved in ever, there's always something that emerges out of that in a way invites me to do something else. And there's always many invitations and many, ways to move forward, both, in relation to that particular project and its aims, and then at the same time in relation to all those other things that weren't picked up on or weren't tapped into, but the other opportunities or avenues kind of open for them. So the creative, and one of those may be working on them theoretically or conceptually, others are practically continuing with the work or with the children, for example. And I think that's one of the key parts of this idea of moving with things that we are part of, helping to emerge and taking accountability of that. So yeah, I think that's part and parcel of doing anything with people and in this world and its multiple participants.
Thank you. Mela.
Yeah, I would say as the project progressed, an interesting thing that happened is that individual participants that are part of this activist group, but also part of other groups, in some cases went back to me to ask for digital tools that could have been useful for other situations. So asking for advice to support other contexts I wasn't even aware were existing. So that really made me aware that if you have people politically motivated, you really can start a conversation that can go beyond the single activity you propose and the single tools you propose. And then, as I was mentioning before, I am start thinking about these emotional issues that could support adoption, and that these are important for me as well. For example, yeah, please.
Okay, sorry to just cut it like that with my hand up, which is part of the moving on and the temporality and the emotion that this conversation bring up for us. If we were in person, we will be taking this to the corridor to talk about so many things. I'm thinking about concepts as commons and sustainability in all the scales that you all talk in your papers, and the role of design for these off-the-shelf relations, the afterwards. So thank you so much for just inspiring so many thoughts and sharing your projects here. But because time in the projects is a constraint, it is here as well, and the next session is coming up soon. So Paulina has just shared on the screen what's coming up next, and I hope we can see each other sometime in person to keep the conversation going, otherwise to keep it going in writing, as we all reference each other's concepts as PD Commons. Thank you very much.